No. Take a seat. Front row. You guys ready to get started? It's a good call out. I probably would have forgot. I always forget that part. Yeah, that's kind of true. Hey, everyone. Thank you. Thanks for coming again. Got a really good turnout today. It's nice. Good to see everybody. Hopefully we can keep this up, throughout the summer and everything. But welcome to the new space. Wow, there is an echo in here. What is going on? Oh, is your? Oh, here, hold on. I'll mute you. There. No. All right. Don't worry, echo. So this will probably be our new space. Moving forward for a while. This is our first time, so anything that we can do better in the future, we'll work on. But yeah, unfortunately, a lot of you guys came to Worthy. It was a great spot, but they wanted to start charging us a lot of money. So not to, since we don't charge anybody for being part of the community, wasn't really working out. But hopefully this works out, and we can keep this going, kind of going back to our roots at the the old CodePen offices. But I do want to say thank you to Uptech Studio, who works in this building, and then Sunlight Solar, who does own this building, and they let us kind of use the common space. So if you're in the market for solar, it's a good company right here. But we got 2 talks today, and then kind of a discussion I want to have with everyone at the end. Talks today are Cody, first-time speaker, and then Mark P is going to be giving a talk on something fun. Reminder, if anyone does have anything they want to talk about, ever, hit me up. I'm just at Kyle on Slack. If you're not on our Slack channel, find me at some point, and I'll send you an invite as well. But jump on there. Hopefully we can, in between these, we can, keep the community vibe going. And I know there are a lot of new programmers here. I talked to a few people today who are kind of going through boot camp and everything right now. So, we want to keep the Slack community and this community really vibrant for people who are joining tech and getting into it, and keep it growing and be good resources for them. And that's how I got started, with BendJS. So, really love seeing everybody. But like I said, if you do want to talk about anything, whether it's a 5-minute talk on something that you're learning at this point, or something new that you found, or a 30-minute talk on some big project you worked on, just let me know. Always need more speakers. Final thing, thanks for the reminder, Robert. Like I like to do every time, is anyone here looking for work right now? And same answer as last time. Wow. It's like a good thing, but so if anyone does happen to look for work in the near future, is anyone here hiring? All right, so if you have friends who are looking for work.
You're going to ask that first question again.
Yeah, now who's looking for work? I think we got some, you got some negotiating power out here if you're looking for work. So, but if you are looking for work, there is a jobs board on the Slack channel. If you're looking to hire and looking for work, that's a good place to go. So without further ado, let's get Cody up here. Like I said, first time speaker, so.
sharing.
Yes. Are you able to connect here?
So I plugged it in, but I think you have to hit something on here to choose the import.
Claude, do you know how this works?
Now you're good, James.
There we go.
There we go.
Nice. All right.
I think you're good to go.
Is everything okay back there? Yeah. Okay. Whoa. Okay. Hey, I'm just curious what the chatter is about.
Oh, we're seeing the lights.
Oh, do you want them off?
We can't.
Oh, shoot. Okay. Well, hopefully you can read okay. So I'm Cody Wilson. I've been in tech since 2014. I originally graduated with a business degree and then found a boot camp in Portland, and I've been in JavaScript since then. Love it. My hobbies brought me to Bend. I love photography and the outdoors, but tech keeps it all going because that does not pay for itself. I'm inherently just kind of a nervous person, so bear with me, and thank you for letting me speak. I feel like I have to give back at some point, and over the last year, our company has really dived into microfrontends, and I've amassed a lot of knowledge, and there's a lot of ambiguity in microfrontends because there's not really a strict library to go to, and there's a lot of original ideas that we had to come up with in order to implement them as we understood them. So hopefully you've learned something from that. But I do understand microfrontends are not for everyone. So I'm just going to start off with a real quick aside before I get into microfrontends on two of my favorite JavaScript extensions that I've found in VS Code lately. They've massively improved my prototyping when I'm working with new functions or like trying to develop new functions. And those are these extensions called Quokka. It's a weird name. It's got a lot of downloads, like 1.6 million right now. And what it is it runs, I'm sure some of you, have any of you used it before? Just one? Okay, one or two. So Quokka, what you do is you start it up here in the command line and you say, hey, I want to start a new Quokka file. And you get to pick what language, either TypeScript or JavaScript. And what it'll do is it'll evaluate your JavaScript in line. So let's say string 1 equals hello. What you can do is go and console log it. And it'll say it right there in line what your output is. It is very hard to read. I just look behind me. Oh yeah, good call. How does that? Is that better? Let me try doing a few more things. I can make it even bigger. Okay, there we go.
We can work out the details of the projector in the next meeting.
Thanks. Okay, so that doesn't look too impressive yet, but when you combine it with something like Github Copilot, which is the second suggestion, I know a lot of people still aren't using it, and I've also fully embraced it and love it. I've kind of replaced my Stack Overflow searches by just using Github Copilot. I'm going to introduce how I do that. So this right here, this gray text, which is especially hard to read if you're in the room, it's suggesting let string 2 equal world, and that is kind of what I was getting at. Is that is totally completed, auto completed by GitHub Autopilot. So I'm going to just add an exclamation mark here, but you can take it several steps further. I'm going to just make a comment, just declaring what I want a function to do. And then Copilot should be able to take my comment and build a function based on what I have kind of described. So I'm going to make the comment of function to concatenate, it auto-completed 2 strings. And then it should add a space between the two, and it's like already completing that. And to make it a little bit harder, I'm going to add an exclamation mark to my string 1. I'm going to say, and remove punctuation from string 1, and remove punctuation from string 1. And already it has named it, which is not the best name, but it's a start. And I'll hit tab to just kind of go with it. And we have here, not a complete answer, but it's like on the way. And I'm surprised I didn't get it right. I probably misspelled punctuation or something in here, because usually in my test so far, it has not failed like that. So add a space between the strings and strip any exclamation marks from string 1. Or I'll say the first string. And if like you've forgotten kind of some regex, or you've forgotten how to strip punctuation, hopefully this time it will actually, it'll replace the exclamation mark. So I love these 2 tools together to just kind of quickly prototype. It can do way more than that. I've been using it to reduce functions, like reduce results from JSON that I get back from an API, and quickly filter through it. It's kind of magical, and it saved me hours and hours. So Quokka and Copilot, you'll save some time. Okay, so to get back into microfrontends, I'm going to start with an example of a hypothetical example of you get a ticket, and the ticket is your company owns 10 different home renovation brands, and they just acquired an 11th. And on every single website that this company owns, they have a little footer that has all of the brands. It's gonna be impossible to see in the room. And you just have to add the logo and a link to the new website. The worst case scenario for this is 10 unique implementations of the component. And this is actually my example with this company. They have a site that they bought in Shopify. They have one in Magento. They have one in BigCommerce. And they have that same element in all of them, and they're all built different ways. So it can be quite the headache. And it's like a full day of work, because you have to find where it is in each one. You have to update all of them. You have to have 10 PRs approved, and then you have to build 10 times. The better scenario in this, still not the best with microfrontends, but the better one is you introduce something like Storybook, which is a component library. You build one component, you push it out to NPM, and then all you have to do is update like the package JSON in each one of the 10 websites that you own. So you end up having to build one component, update that, and then update 10 package JSON. So you actually are doing 11 updates with the Storybook feature, or the Storybook scenario. In a micro front-end world, you still implement a component library, but instead of 11 pushes in the different package JSONs, 11 different Webpack compilations, that just changes to 1. You just build the one Webpack component library build, and the 10 branded websites automatically pick up the changes. How is that possible? And it's through the magic of runtime includes, because Webpack heavily right now, like previous to version 5, relies on build time. Everything has to be there at build time in order to map your website. So if you introduce these dynamic includes through micro front ends, you can bring in those components at runtime. So micro front ends, a definition, independent, autonomous, modular, self-contained units. Essentially Legos. It's something that I think a lot of us strive for, just building blocks that we can kind of plug and play and save time with. And then from Hacker News, I found an interesting comment when I was researching this. Someone said, so it's like server-side includes, but with shared state and built on top of JavaScript modules. And the response to that was, yes, but can you please avoid going around saying that? My children depend on the money I earn by selling support for this. Complexity is a virtue of our industry, and by embracing it, we will all be richer and happier. So be careful with your analogies and just how much you simplify things. And that's from user ISO and then some numbers. So again, just to go over the premise, there are microservices for the front end that have a lot of isolation, encapsulation, that have independent deployment and testing. And you can also use any technology you want and kind of just plug them into an existing architecture. Pretty cool. From Martin Fowler's website, he describes that when you embrace the micro front-end architecture, you can kind of go from a team that is like this, where you have a guy who's on styles, and he has to go into each team and do the styles for each team. And you can instead kind of determine or develop these a vertical architecture where you have ownership from styling, forms, and validation. You have ownership over the entire product instead of relying on someone to come in and help you with that. Okay, so this is, if you go to Webpack's website right now, you'll see this image, and it's actually an animation of, it shows kind of how Webpack bundles your assets right now. It'll start with an entry point, and it'll work its way through and find everything that it needs to include. And then something magical happens, and then they're all bundled together, and you have a website that knows where everything is. And another way to look at it is like this, where you have all the pieces of Mr. Potato Head over here, and then you send it through Webpack, and you get Mr. Potato Head at the other end. The important caveat is that you have to have all the pieces when you bundle right over here. You can't go and switch out a mouth later on. And that's where micro front ends are going to come in. So with micro front ends, you simplify that beginning stage. And instead of all the components going in, maybe you just send in a potato. And you let Webpack, through module federation, build out a potato with some openings, and through those openings, it can go out to your code that's also deployed through Webpack and hosted on something like S3 that's out in the cloud. And your potato that you've built down here, which is called a host, or for this example, you could kind of think of it as a dictator, because it's going to determine what it brings in from the cloud and put on and assemble itself with. And the beauty of this is that when you have a new ticket and they've decided to update the footer, and that footer comes around and looks like this, you can tell your potato, hey, I want to use the new footer, and without having to touch the eyes or the ears or the hat, it can get rid of the old one and put the new footer in. Which goes back to that first example I was showing. Oh yeah, so, excuse me. So this is called a host again, but just because this host is able to assemble all the components on itself, doesn't mean that you can't take that host and put it on top of another host, and that's called a bi-directional host. And the best thing I could think of for this example or this analogy was this, where he's wearing the host because he can also change out the host that he's bringing in. So it's highly modular, highly flexible. Okay, so that guy ISO would definitely hate how much I've simplified it because his family depends on the money from this. So now that I've kind of explained what it is, I do have to say it's not for every project. There's a tremendous undertaking that's required in order to get it to be that modular and to build everything at runtime. So if these are some good use cases for micro front ends, if you're upgrading a legacy website in piecemeal fashion, if you want to just start to bring in incremental upgrades, if you have massive complexity on your website and you need to split that up between teams, if you have distributed, uncoordinated teams, like a lot of the bigger corporations like Netflix and Google have kind of embraced this, like where they have a Netflix, a video player team, or they don't need to speak to payments team, but it all needs to fall under the umbrella of Netflix.com. So it's gotten popular when you have hundreds of employees and makes a lot more sense. Also, it makes sense for the elements that I've kind of shown, like header and footer, that don't have much logic and are kind of easy to plug and play with. Also, in our case, this is why we primarily embraced it. We are a framework like Dropbox, and we have lots of small applications inside of there because you upload media to our service, and you can take that and edit it or upload it, and there's a lot of different actions that you can take, and those kind of naturally divide themselves into areas that we can divide and have stakeholder ownership of. And I've kind of just covered why we adopted it. If you don't know, Google has published what they call DORA. I'm going to link to this real quick. It's called the DevOps Quick Check, or DORA stands for, I forget, but it's something with DevOps. But they have kind of a checklist here so you can self-assess where your company's at. And when we started, we were at about like a 40%. It's kind of like Lighthouse, but for DevOps is the best analogy I've come up with. And by the end of our transition to Microfrontends, we actually finished at 100%, where we've been able to increase our CI/CD pipeline and different deployments and all of that stuff that's kind of a hot issue right now. So again, Dora, DevOpsResearch.com is where you can find that. There were significant hurdles when we started adopting this. There's no standardized framework or library like Redux where you can go in and just kind of copy what someone else has done, because you're going to run into things that no one else has run into before. Also, when you go out and look for tutorials, they are unfortunately just kind of cover what I've shown, like the header and the footer. They don't dive into when you want to share a function and the state of that function is different. So it's hard to kind of navigate those. And then also the time investment, it's 8 months that it took us to get to from beginning to end. So I want to introduce this. I've introduced this topic, but it does come with a healthy amount of criticism for good reason. People see this and they kind of just go, why the hell would you do that to yourself? Why can't you just build it and do things how they've been for the last 6 years? If you actually look on Hacker News, which is kind of a trusted source for all of us, the #1 thread that I could find with the most comments, and the top comment was this guy who, the important part of this, you can't read it in here. He says, "Microfrontends are cancer," right here. Please don't fall for it. And this is a guy who works at IMDb. He said, "We tried it. It's a terrible idea." So that's the top comment, the most upvoted on Hacker News. Another one in this thread is maybe it's useful for some, but it feels like a continuation of the dark side that front-end tooling is going on, way overcomplicated, brittle and buggy, significant barriers to just sitting down and building stuff. And I'm sharing this because I don't disagree. It is a tremendous barrier if you want to sit down and build something fun. I think you should embrace it when the need for it becomes obvious. And for us, it became obvious for a few reasons, like I shared. But please don't start a project and do this, because you don't do that to yourself. And also on that front, I think that the micro front-end community has brought it on themselves, because they'll share tutorials that look like this. And what you have here is Vue and Angular and React and Svelte going into the Blender and spitting out a website that includes all of them in different components. And like, that sucks. No one wants that. If you look at that and like you join a company that's doing things that way, there are some issues there, like where one developer hates the other developers and they just can't talk to each other. That's a problem. And for some reason, the micro front-end community has kind of like embraced this and said, look what we can do. And it's no surprise when it gets called cancer. This talk was, and our implementation, Micro Frontends, was heavily influenced by Zach Jackson. He is a principal engineer at Lululemon, and he is very active in developing Micro Frontends in Webpack 5. He's a good follow on Medium. He writes some pretty great articles there. And as well as Jack Harrington. He is a Portland guy who is on YouTube. He just hit 50,000 subscribers. He used to be a principal engineer at Nike, and he puts out some of the best videos on YouTube that I found. So he's definitely worth looking into. That kind of concludes the overview of microfrontends, and I just kind of want to go into our specific implementation of them at our company. And it's going to be hard. Is it pretty hard for you guys to read any of this? What's up here? I'm going to abbreviate some of it then. So I'll go to, we are hosted in Azure right now. All of our stuff goes through there. I'm going to forego the coding example and just kind of go into the high level architecture. We have about 50 pipelines now, and at any time you can go in here and look at, these are all the different components of the pieces of Potato Head that we can choose from. And we've divided it into what we call applications in our system. Like we have an inventory application that lets you browse all of the files that you've uploaded. We also have a dashboard for like quick glances, and these are continuous deployments. Anytime there's a commit to master, this pipeline will run. And what's really cool is you can click into this pipeline and it shows you the stages, and the stages read, this one is build. So the build was successful. The file copy was successful in uploading it to the cloud. And then we also have 3 stages, dev, test, and prod. And each one of those is locked behind an approval that has to be made. So when you commit to this, it'll actually hang on like the dev release and wait for you to say, okay, go ahead and go to test release. And through that system, we've been able to implement versioning, because each time that this pipeline builds, it creates a new version of that component. And when we go into our backend,
Are you using React or what are you using on the front?
yeah, we can use React on the front end. Yeah, we use actually React and then a lot of old school vanilla JavaScript. It's kind of an older system.
Can you share state between components?
You can. Yeah. We have not gone that far, but you definitely can. There are some videos from Jack Harrington, who I shared earlier, who talks about how you can create a store that gets passed around between the components. Yeah. But for all of our applications, we have application options in the backend, and they all have a version. So for like our admin app, when the pipeline starts, it will build out the code, and then when that new code hits our static store, it'll come back and then increase this version. And if this build goes out and we determine that there's something wrong, rolling back to the last component is as simple as coming in here and decrementing this value by 1. It was just pretty cool. The major benefits of this have been that our deployments have dramatically decreased, like the amount of time they take. They used to be an hour because it would deploy if you wanted to change anything, you had to run everything and test everything again. And now when you want to update the eyeballs, you just run that, and there's significantly fewer tests on that piece of isolated code. So I think I'm going to leave it there because that was pretty dense, and thank you for listening. Questions? Yeah.
So are those release stages, or those uploads to S3, or like what is the actual, or is that changing the number in the database, or how is that actually?
Yeah, good question. So what Azure calls they call them artifacts. I'm not sure why, but it's essentially S3, where it will publish a version at a URL that includes the version number. So then we can build out what we want to grab just by using that version, because it'll always retain like the name of the component we're building, and then we just can change the version with it. Yeah.
So what distinguishes a micro front end from all the runtime embeddable stuff that's existed since like iframes were invented. Like you've got weather widgets or badges on GitHub badges or media players. Like it sounds like this has been around. Like that sort of stuff's been around forever. I'm just kind of curious what microfrontend means in that context.
Yeah, good question. I think that's kind of like a nuanced discussion because like you include jQuery at the top of your page and then you can just use the $ anywhere in your code and you're like, what's the difference? When you really get into the code, you can actually say like import, this component and then build your component. This would be a good example where I could bring up the code. You could actually import it and it looks like it's part of your system, even though it's not. And that's kind of through the magic of grabbing that remote and kind of like what Webpack does. I'm probably not doing a great job of explaining it. It is a hard thing to be specific about.
Well, does your final markup that you end up with, I would assume that's basically identical to as if you had built that component 11 times and included it each time, right? You aren't loading that component on like a user load in the browser. That is happening at the compile time, essentially, or not?
No, when the user gets to the page, what'll happen is we send an array of URLs that we want that user to load.
Okay.
And those URLs are all of our components.
HTTP request to get these items.
Yeah, for each component there is a separate request for it. So tree shaking in all of its glory kind of goes out the window because you can't really tree shake because you don't know if you're going to need part of that when you load it. Yeah.
But I would assume you're caching on the side of that too. Right?
Correct. Yeah. Another question?
So have you run into any problems with consistent styling, or how do you handle that? Make it sound like you can be consistent.
Yeah, no, definitely. So we had to develop a library in Storybook, I'm blanking on the name right now and I apologize, a component library. And so as long as you kind of, that's helped us a lot in maintaining consistent styling because there is that kind of North Star that you have to include and bring in order to develop components in our framework.
Yeah. And so all of your different verticals still use the same component library, essentially. That's what you're saying.
Correct.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but they don't have to, but then we would break that consistency of styling, but they definitely don't have to.
Do you see any appreciable performance degradation from loading all those assets at one time? I assume between HTTP and HTTP2, you're seeing pretty different performance.
Right. Well, each like component is actually very small when we bring it in. It's like 3 kilobytes, and so we do get throttled. We do see some throttling because you can only have like 8 simultaneous requests, but it's really not super impactful for us. We also have the benefit of being a business-to-business platform, and it's not as important. Yeah.
How many of these are you actually running on like any individual page on your service? Like, I mean, are you pulling in 50 of these things every time? Or
yeah, I can actually show you that. We've built a quick URL so we can see all the components that are running on our site. And this is all of our components running on our test site. So probably about 30 or 40 of them.
Does that map to like 30 or 40 HTTP requests, or are there multiple requests for each of those components?
There's one request per component. Yeah. So that's what it looks like. And we deliver that, and then it gets included dynamically at runtime with all of these versions. So,
Yeah, there's a question from online, and
Yeah.
I might have missed the answer, but do you manage global state in a separate microfrontend?
really? Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's another ugly side people don't address, is that there is some global setting that we've kind of had to rely on. We definitely have a cache that we use. Yeah. And I don't think you have to use a cache, but we just kind of saw it as a way to quickly, I know it's not good to use globals, but it ended up being something that we could use because we didn't figure out a way around it. And I think that might be something that people figure out as this continues to evolve. It's not figured out yet. That's kind of the fun of it. Yeah.
Any other questions?
But one more.
Is it SEO friendly, or did you not have to worry about that with PHP?
I don't have to worry about that. Yeah.
Then another quick question is, do you have to make sure that all your dependencies are running on the same version, or will it they can maybe on different ones, or can there be conflicts?
So that's really cool. So we've hacked together this implementation of it, but Webpack 5's implementation of it, they expose, instead of exposing the component by itself, they expose what's called a remote entry. And that's essentially a manifest of like, hey, this component is shipped with all of these things. Which parts do you want? And in that component, you can say, it ships with React, but when you're reading it, if you already have React on the page, it won't include React when it includes that component. That's like the really cool thing that's happening with Webpack 5. But there is a way to say, hey, React's already on the page. Please do not include that in your distribution build.
Are you saying that at build time, or are you saying that is the page saying that when it makes the request?
It happens at runtime where it reads the remote entry manifest and then is able to pick what it needs based on what it doesn't already have, which is crazy. Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Mic is muted. Hello, everybody. My mic was muted. Up next, we have Mark. All right. Yeah, well, can you jump on? I sent you an invite to this. You can just jump on and share your screen. Oh, yeah. Slack. Yeah. Oh, I probably need to get you on the Wi-Fi. There, just jump with the Wi-Fi because you're streaming. Scroll down. That worked. Forget the password. That should work.
I don't know what's up with that Slack host.
There we go. All right. I know it's very yellow.
I'm pretty colorblind.
So the contrast, if you think that's bad, just wait till the example.
All right, yeah, click on that link. And then you should be able to just share.
Hello.
Yeah. You have to enter your display name. All right. There we go. Now you can just share your screen and we'll be live
Right.
for the thousands of people watching at home.
And that share screen.
Oh, down at the bottom.
There we go. Oh, you know what? Poop. My password isn't. Oh, there we go. Yes.
I think you just have to click on the Chrome app because it's a Chrome extension. You're in the show.
All right.
Check the audio. Javascript says the audio.
Okay.
Should be through his computer.
Hello, 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 hello. Can you hear me? Can anybody hear me? Hello, hello, hello.
Yep.
All right.
All right, good.
All right. So, all right. So, I tried to do a slideshow as well, and I'm just kind of failing all over the place. But so today's talk is a little bit of humility, a little bit of experience, but also just kind of something I think is pretty cool. Short introduction. My name is Mark Pernato. I've lived here in Bend for a while. I've been a software developer for a while. Right now, I'm really heavy into front end developing. Kind of over the top UI experiences. It's kind of my, what I'm into right now. And an experience came up recently that just kind of took me aback a little bit and had me scratching my head and eating a little bit of humble pie. The scenario was this. The problem specifically was this. We were looking at embedding an iframe in a web page, and traditionally this isn't so much of a problem embedding an iframe, like that's done all the time, but the real crux of the issue was we absolutely had to at least have a one-way communication from that embedded child, back up to that parent. So traditionally, how do you do this? Well, you come up with a bunch of hacky little workarounds, right? You make like an API endpoint call, and then you have the parent, kind of listen if there's a change. Maybe it's polling, that same field that you just updated, and then maybe the timing works out right, but it doesn't ever really, and so. I'm trying to like construct some of this and trying to do this. And this particular situation, we wanted to we were looking for a way to kind of embed one repository, kind of front end repository into a different one from that didn't have React. So we had this like kind of communication breakdown, right? I can't, I don't have a state that I could just, do a micro front end and just say, hey, Backbone, wake up. So we had to come around, come up with something else. And then somebody on the team one day, during stand-up, I'm expressing, a little bit of frustration, and they're like, well, have you tried post message? And it's one of those things where like, I don't know, it felt like the anvil, dropped on top of me. I was immediately intrigued. So where do we all go to research, those kind of things? Well, I go to I trust MDN as a resource, and started reading up on what post message does. So just kind of in a nutshell, everybody here could read. I'm going to post the URL here in a minute. Maybe we'll share it. But y'all can read this. The issue is kind of what I explained. You have a cross-origin policy that you violate if you try to either access information within that iframe, or vice versa. So what this does is allows you to post a message, literally, to the specific URL that you are, that you're targeting, that you're expecting to hear from, and then that you kind of go out and say, hey, like, post this message to this website. So this web page will show you lots of examples and technical jargon, again, that you can read. I like getting my hands dirty and seeing like an example. So to demonstrate this, I started by just creating two simple little create React apps. There's one that I put on localhost 5555. This is my child. This will represent the iframe, in my window. And then I have a parent who is on port 4444. Okay. And then the idea is I'm going to embed 5555 into the parent of 4444. Right? Pretty straightforward. Okay. So that's the idea. I know, I came up with this all by myself. Right. So that contrast that I was talking about. So this outlier is the parent, okay, and then this inlier is the child. I'm not going to show you how it doesn't work. There's no point in that. But what I do want to show you is I can distinguish on my parent level, down here where the data collected from the child iframe, which button I have clicked. Okay, so second, right? And so I'm creating this like one-way communication from that, embedded iframe back up to my parent for whatever. Like maybe this is a modal, and I pass, I click this button and it, does, it makes this disappear, or I click this button and it moves it, somewhere. I don't know, but I can have separate actions, for either button. So let's dive into a little bit of code. Does anybody not understand like this, kind of like what I'm going for here? No, pretty straightforward. Yes, good. Onward. So the code then, all right. Again, took a hint from Cody. Thanks, Cody. Made everything white and huge. Oh, but it didn't show up really well, did it? Oh. now you can't really read it side by side, which was the best part. Okay, let's look at the parent first. Actually, let's look at the child first. It'll be a little bit easier to go from the inside to the out. So this is what I'm returning.
I would have to make that a little bit bigger.
Okay.
Make a lot bigger.
Okay.
One more. Bigger.
Really?
There.
All right. All right. So all this component does, it just has two buttons that I send to an on-click event, and this is just a state, which is just an array of strings, and I just wanted to just display it. So what happens is when this first button is clicked, I send this window.parent.post message. This message, it says first button. Okay, this is the message. This can syntactically be an object, so you can pass a whole lot of information through that, or you can just pass this string. And then I want to specify the specific URL that I want to communicate with, namely my parent URL. All right. On the parent side, here I have, this is the base of my component. It just, the header just contains the iframe. I've styled it a little bit to make it look how it does. And then, same kind of approach. It's state of an array of strings. But the difference on this side is I have a use effect hook that is basically listening for a message, okay, and it's this kind of keyword that triggers this. When I I created handle message as its own function, so I could pass the event, and within this event, I've got really three options. I have an origin that tells me where that message is coming from, okay? I have the data, which is whatever that first parameter was that has been sent. And then I have a source, which tells me, where it came from, the URL that it came from, okay? In this case, the origin, I'm explicitly asking it, if you are not my child URL, we're all done, listening. There's no need to pay any more attention. But if you get past that and the data is, this, then I'm populating my state, for me to be able to display. All right. Any questions kind of about, that so far? Pretty simple. One way, back. All right. Last thing I wanted to talk about then was this event.source. The event.source is, again, the source of where you got that information. If I wanted to create that two-way communication, all right, so if I wanted not only the parent to talk to the child, but then the child, respond, or I'm sorry, the child talk to the parent, but then have the parent talk back to the child, I could do that by just creating another post message on my my parent to send a message, back, and that will look like this. Start over. All right. It's pretty instantaneous, because there's not a whole lot of information, but it's just I click the first button, it responds. Click the first button and it automatically responds with whatever. Again, I could have fleshed this example out a lot better and used dynamic data, passed pass an object through that data, to really narrow down, really get specific with if I was concerned about security or something like that, and maybe I'm not just going to rely on the origin or the source. Maybe there's a way I can pass a key or some kind of parameter that would ensure that secure connection, but it's kind of outside the scope of this explanation. Anyway, I thought that was pretty cool. It certainly saved me a number of different times throughout my career. Super glad to learn something like this. Super glad that there are other humble developers that don't make me feel like a complete idiot when I don't know something that, I don't know. And the worst part is this doesn't seem like it's necessarily super new, but it does seem like a problem that I've had, in the past. So, no other questions?
Just you can do this across like different ways. It doesn't have to be parent-child relationship, right?
Maybe. I mean, I did try that. So if I did something like,
Like you just bring up another window
Uh-huh.
on that same thing
Mhm.
and start knocking away at that. I bet you'll see that in the original window.
because it's not the window.parent.
Well, because it's all the same origin. Like these frames, like these windows all have the same origin. You're sending messages to a specific origin.
Right. But I think because I'm specifically sending that post message.
Your child here doesn't have a target, right? At that
Right,
point, essentially.
right,
Oh, okay.
right. So I could specify, we could sit here and hack it out if you want, but it would be essentially right. This is the child one. Yeah. So it would be essentially, right here. So it's this window.parent. It's trying to, it's trying to listen to that.
Basically broadcasting.
So you could use post message, like if you just wanted to test the proof of concept, you don't have to specify a URL at all. I could just put that there and it would just, I think that would only work on the listener actually, but proof of concept wise, I'm sure it would work. I'm sure you can get it to work. You just have to figure out a way to send that message.
Didn't mean to take us down the rabbit hole.
No, that's all right. That's a good question though. I thought I'd get lots more pushback on how insecure this is.
I actually ran into this exact issue in adding like a voter registration form on the site.
Mhm.
And we ended up using Google Tag Manager and a whole mess of listeners.
Oh.
So this is like way better.
Oh, awesome! Yay! Yeah. So I
I
just.
didn't know that program at the time. I switched to Google there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, with that, if you're able to post that, then clearly the ability to post to a URL that you're not embedded in, within on the same page, definitely sounds like it's possible. So, all right. Thank you all so much for letting me talk. Don't know how to stop.
Yep. All good. Cool. Thanks, Mark. All right. I don't think there were, no additional questions online. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming. Plan is to do this again next month. Let's see if I can get the exact date. It's always the third Tuesday, but that would make it the 17th. I think that would be we'll get something posted, but 17th of May. So a couple things real quick before I let you go. One, I just wanted to gauge, I'll post something on Slack, but wanted to gauge interest in doing a hackathon at some point this summer. Thumbs up. Yeah. Okay. Cool. I actually was reached out to by someone who runs a volunteer organization looking to do kind of an app for volunteers and people who work with conservancies around Bend. I think it's planting trees or saving rivers or something like that. Some kind of overall conservancy, but so started a conversation with them about doing a hackathon, kind of some community building. So just wanted to gauge interest. Seems like we get a cool space and get everyone involved would be really cool. The other thing is, looks like finally probably going to actually like incorporate BendJS and make it a 501c3. So we've gotten a decent amount of like sponsorship interest, and I think we could do a lot with that. I'd really love to do more with like actually like BendJS memorabilia and giving stuff out for speakers who, people who want to volunteer and give back to the community and share talks and do other things that we could potentially do, and maybe someday do a conference. We've talked about it for a couple of years now, and would love to be able to do that. So that being said, it's something I'll probably be working on soon. So if any of your companies have any interest in sponsoring, a local meetup, definitely let me know. As well, if you have any ideas of what we could do if we got a bunch of sponsorship, we've kind of been offered over the years, some cool stuff we could do with that and really, expand the community. I know we've talked in the past about maybe reaching out to other parts of the tech community, not just JavaScript, especially after COVID kind of killed all the other tech meetups in town, and expanding that out, so reaching out to the community, doing more hackathons, supporting local causes, and then just cool things for you guys. So any ideas that you have, hit me up on Slack. I'm just at Kyle. And if, like I said, if your companies have any interest in sponsoring a local meetup, let me know. Cool. Thanks, everybody.